In the dynamic world of private LTE networks for utilities, it's all about a collective approach toward grid modernization solutions. Together with our 100-plus member ecosystem and the Utility Strategic Advisory Board, we're de-risking private LTE investments. We're not just providing solutions, we're pioneering a cleaner, safer, more affordable, and secure energy future through 900 megahertz powered private LTE networks. By joining us, you're part of a force driving innovation, accelerating returns, and future-proofing the entire ecosystem. It's more than spectrum. It's about evolving together. Don't miss out. Embrace the power of collective action, ensuring a sustainable utility private LTE evolution.
To learn more, visit Anterix.com.
Newly installed cables and aging cable systems can be the source of costly failures due to repair costs, outage downtime, and revenue loss. Factory-grade cable scanning technology by ImCorp, an Osmos company, takes the guesswork out of problematic underground cables. Learn more by contacting your local Osmos cable scanning expert at osmos.com/imcorp. That's osmose.com/IMCORP.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am UTC President and CEO Rusty Williams, and thank you for joining us today on this edition of the UTC podcast that we call the Intersection. We call it the Intersection because UTC and its members sit at the intersection of technology and the delivery of reliable and cost-effective utility services. You know, each month when we plan the episode that we're going to do for that month, I always get excited about the guests we're going to have. I hope I get excited because I wasn't excited about it. I'm not sure why we were having them on. But this episode in particular has special meaning for myself and I think many others that typically listen to this broadcast. Our guest for this month and this episode is Mr. Bill Moroney. Bill is the former UTC president and CEO. Bill served as that president and CEO from 1998 to 2011. During that time, Bill helped establish UTC as the voice of the utility, telecom, and technology industry. And he also helped grow the organization domestically as well as internationally during his tenure. Prior to joining UTC, Bill served as the CEO of other trade associations, including the Multimedia Telecommunications Association, the Electronic Messaging Association, and NACHA, the Electronic Payments Association. Today, Bill is enjoying his retirement. He still lives in the Washington, D.C. area with his wife, Tracy, and his dog, Paxi. Bill, it's really great to have you on the podcast today and as my special guest. Thank you for being here.
Rusty, thank you very much for that introduction.
I know many of the people that will be listening to this were involved with UTC back when you were involved. It wasn't that long ago. In some regards, it seems like yesterday. In other, it seems like a long time ago. But there are many people still around that were here and involved in the organization when you were part of it. I know that you have been retired for 12 or 13 years, and people would like to know what's going on in the world of Bill. So why don't you give us a little recap of what's been going on since you retired 12 or 13 years ago?
Well, let's see. Tracy retired about a year before I did, and seeing how much fun she was having was a motivator. But it really seemed like a good time for me to retire. I mean, I was, they always say when you retire, don't retire until retirement looks at least as good as what you're doing. A lot of people make the mistake and retire having no idea what they're going to do, and then they regret not having retired and wish they'd not retired.
Right.
We both retired, never looked back. But at the time I retired, it was also seemed to be a good time because everything seemed to be working pretty well at UTC. We didn't have any real major problems facing the organization. We had money in the bank. And so leaving was not leaving a pile of problems for a new CEO. I did some consulting for about a year after retiring, but mostly it was just great fun to hang out with Tracy. When we both worked, we both traveled a lot, but unfortunately we traveled separately, not together. So since retiring, we've traveled a lot, been to a lot of interesting places that we'd been singly, but we got to go back together and went to a lot of interesting places we'd never been to before. In 2015, I was diagnosed with muscle invasive bladder cancer. Too many wonderful cigars at the chairman's reception, but who knew cigars were bad for you? Took me about a year to get rid of it. The cancer, not the bladder. Managed to keep that. And as you mentioned earlier, since then, we've added a dog to our family, a little dog, and she has trained us well. And that's it, just enjoying life.
Well, that's great. And, I'm glad and happy that you did survive the cancer issue. But in talking to you over the past 9-10 months, I know you've come through that and everything seems to be well there. So I'm glad that has happened as well. Hope that continues. Yeah, and I know you and Tracy have enjoyed that time to be able to get out and do the things that you guys enjoy doing. We do travel a lot in this job, as you and Tracy both did. And we didn't say this earlier for those that didn't know, Tracy was a leader in trade associations as well. And so you get to go a lot of places, but you are by yourself. You don't have your spouse with you, significant other, and you go, you fly in, you go to the hotel, you go to the conference center, you do your thing, and then you fly out. And it seems glamorous, but sometimes it's not all that glamorous. But hey, we're not digging ditches, right? In this job,
Right.
It's not like we've got a real job, but it is fun to go back, and I've done that through the years myself with Ivette. And hey, we've got to go back there. Hey, man, we need to go back there. Well, when I went through your background, your professional highlights, you were in the trade association business for most of that career. What is it that drew you there, or maybe more importantly, what kept you there in terms of, hey, I like this and I want to do this for a career?
Well, it was, I mean, as you know, except for brief period early jobs in politics and journalism, I ended up after journalism going into PR for the American Bankers Association, and from PR and marketing standpoint, trade associations are really about telling a story. And the nice thing about trade associations is you've got a bunch of committed members who are really working together to try and get something done. And the ability to, by working together collaboratively, accomplish things was very appealing. I've always been lucky that I've been a quick study. Learning issues became easy for me. And as somebody once said, I guess I was also smart enough to know what I didn't know. So I could rely on members who were in the trenches in the business to know that and become accomplished at making an organization of those members doing things the members wanted to do. So the job is to rely on the members to tell me what to do. In the 80s, I was involved in two trade associations that dealt with the introduction of new financial technologies. In the 80s, we didn't have ATMs and debit cards and direct pay deposit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Electronic Mail Association and NACHA were all about. In the 90s, I ran the Electronic Mail Association when our concern was, can we make email better than a fax? I think we kind of overdid that. And
So are you to blame for that?
I refuse to take blame for it totally, but it was a good example of members working together. We had a strategic planning meeting with the board members of the Electronic Mail Association, trying to figure out what are we going to do in this and so forth. And the exercise was one night we broke up into two groups, and the goal was, okay, you don't work for email anymore, you work for the fax industry. How do you kill email? And these people came back with some very good examples on how to kill email that allowed us to sort of better position the Electronic Mail Association in a way to more effectively compete with fax. And at the time, that was a big deal. This was back in the era when you might have had MCI Mail, AT&T Mail, CompuServe, AOL, but they couldn't talk to each other. So it was an interesting time, and it was an interesting example of putting members who know the business together, working on an issue, coming up with ideas they probably wouldn't have come up with as individual companies on their own. So When I got involved with UTC, I was in the competitive telecom business, and at that time, utilities were looked on as the next great fiber networks of the world and so forth. But when I got into UTC and learning about it, I mean, what became critical to me was learning all about the spectrum needs of the organization and really how important everything was at UTC about ensuring that there was reliable communications to protect the services that we offered our customers and especially the workers who ran out into the field to fix it when things went wrong. Looking at the hurricanes that have just hit the southeast, and it looks like another one's coming this week. I can't not think about the workers that are out there trying to restore it and how important, how critical communications is for them.
Yeah, I've seen, to that very point, I've seen stuff over the last week where there are crews, mutual aid crews from all 50 states that have converged into the southeast to help with that. So that is that's tremendous, the way that industry works together. A couple of follow-up questions for you there. One, and when you looked at your in those trade associations you were involved with, there were some themes there, right? I mean, there was telecommunications, there was electronic mail, there was financial electronic transactions. I mean, that wasn't your area of expertise, right? And as you began that in that journey, but and you learned it along the way. So, I'm just curious, what got you there and what, kept you there, not just as a trade association leader, but in that particular space.
Well, in the early 70s, when I joined the American Bankers Association, I came in and my boss said, we got a new issue. You were in broadcasting, so you understand that technical stuff. You do electronic funds transfer. That was at a time when there were probably 4 or 5 ATM networks or ATM banks with ATMs out there. And so by the nature of it, I had to learn technology. The first press release I wrote was about a new scheme for routing numbers on the bottom of 10-inch checks. I mean, it was really, on one hand it was boring, but on the other hand, it was the technology that held it all together. So that got me involved in technology, and from there, I was never a coder, I was never an IT guy, but it was enough to know what I didn't know and to figure out how to tell that story in a way that people could understand it, people could appreciate it. And often in the industry, just like it is at UTC, it is taking the technology story and explaining it in a way in which senior management, who doesn't have a clue about technology, can understand it, whether it's a banker who got started with paper ledgers trying to understand how an ATM network works, or a CEO who came up through the accounting department at a utility trying to figure out why a telecommunications network is important to the utility.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. All right, so I got one more follow-up question for you. The idea of strategic planning, you brought that up in your comments you just made. And in my experience, and for those that may not know, I was involved with UTC as a utility representative back, starting in the early 90s through the late 2000s, and had the opportunity to be one of the board officers that served while Bill was here at UTC. But one of the things that I learned from you was this idea of the importance of strategic planning. Yeah, it was one of the things you did. My experience with you at UTC is, that was a big deal to you, and you made a special effort every year that you went through that process. And it wasn't just a check the box kind of process. It was a true, what is it we need to be doing? So what did you understand about that? What made that whole idea of strategic planning important enough to carve out the time and put forth the effort to have that for the association to follow?
Well, I mean, one of the advantages of my disadvantage in not being a creature of the industry, not having worked in the industry, was I knew there was a whole lot of stuff I didn't know. And so for me, the opportunity to, talk to 2 people in a bar who work in different parts of the industry and listen to them talk about the same thing differently was educational. It was helpful. It gave me insights. The ability to do that with a couple of dozen people who were locked in a hotel room in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do but that was extraordinarily valuable. And you could not help but see every time they would talk, one person would stimulate the imagination of another person. And it was a great experience, and it inevitably validated that a lot of the things we were doing were right. But I can't think of a single time we've done strategic planning where we didn't come up with something that was new, that was different, that was more important. A good example was toward the end of my time, one of the last strategic planning exercises I was involved with was there was a big discussion about whether we should get involved in cybersecurity. And the whole issue was, well, no, we've got, isolated networks. There was genuine disagreement that cybersecurity was not going to be an issue, or at least, finally it was sort of conceded, well, it may be an issue for you, so it's probably important to the organization. Maybe we should take a harder look at it, and maybe I'm not as secure as I think. But that was at the very beginnings of cybersecurity, which I suspect is a bit more important for you guys now than it was when I was there.
Yeah, that's true. And we've gone through, I mean, I've completed 9 months now in this role. And we did go through a pretty hefty strategic planning exercise from late spring through the summer. And that was one of the areas we talked about. And, is it a thing? Yes, it's a thing. But is it a separate thing? Or is it something that we should consider in every other aspect of the business, whether it's networks or whether it's people or whether it's process? And we basically come to the conclusion that should be a part of everything we do, right? It's not an isolated thing, it's part of everything we do. But that's the kind of process that when you go through these exercises, those things rise to the surface. And I think that's important as well. From my involvement with you and those around me know I'm a long, range thinker, more strategic and much less tactical. So we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and mine's on the tactical side, but being able to have that long-term plan, kind of helps me kind of get everything in a row and kind of do things we need to do day in and day out. So in that time period you were here, Bill, that was from 1998 to 2011.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of things that happened during that time, not just in the industry, but around, the country and globally, for that matter, that impacted the organization and the utility industry. Let's start with some of the good aspects of it. When you think back over that period, what do you think of fondly? What are you most proud of the things that the organization and the industry was able to accomplish during that 12, 13-year time period?
Well, I think the things I'm the most proud of was the ability to sort of, it doesn't sound sexy and like that, but it was staying focused, doing everything we could at the moment to ensure the most reliable communications our members had. You mentioned 9/11, and I don't know how many people know this, but on 9/11, the morning of 9/11, there were probably 24 utility telecom fiber network. A lot of utilities had utility telecom subsidiaries that sold dark fiber, sold broadband services and so forth. There are about 24 of them were scheduled to meet in New York in the World Trade Center that morning for breakfast to listen to a proposal for a roll-up of those networks.
Huh.
As fate would have it, the night before, the guys had a late night. And before going to bed very too late, they rescheduled the meeting. They were all in Lower Manhattan, but they were on the way to the meeting when the towers came down.
Oh,
now,
wow.
We in the office knew that was going on. And when we heard after getting over the shock of the towers coming down and so forth, we were sort of, where the hell are these guys? And it was most of the day before we or their companies found out where they were. Ironically, the people who were trying to pull together the deal didn't survive. And that was probably one of the last gasps of trying to do a big roll up of the utility telecom networks. There were certainly some sales and so forth and things like that. Other things we did during that period that, I remember when we got involved in broadband over power line. A question I heard frequently was, what the hell is UTC doing in broadband over power line? But it's an example of some of the things we did, because there were a lot of companies, both utilities and technology companies, that were looking at BPL as a thing to do, as a way to deliver broadband. Our attitude was, if UTC wasn't involved in this, others would be, and would be driving a solution, whether that was technology or regulations, onto utilities we would be better positioned to figure out how to protect utilities and ensure that if this did happen, utilities were in a dominant role if we were involved. That's why we got involved. That's why we stayed involved, and at least we're involved, still involved in it when I left. But things I'm most proud of the entire time was we did everything humanly possible to ensure spectrum and reliable communications for utilities. That was it. That was our goal. That was really fundamentally what underlay every decision we made. How can we do that? And we
Yeah.
kept.
And that's great, from a historical perspective. But when you look at that time when you were talking about BPL, when then, it in and of itself didn't, just take off and, was a fabulous commercial success. I look at it today as the precursor to what a lot of the utilities are doing when they are getting into the broadband business, and getting the federal funding and helping try to bridge that digital divide that exist across the country. So I think we learn every step that we take along the way. We learn, or we should learn, and makes us better the next time. And we did do some BPL, and some of it was interesting when we saw the applications that occurred. Yeah, you mentioned 9/11, and I think a lot of people don't understand how some of these things that happen around the world that has nothing to do directly with the utility industry impacts us, right? 9/11 is a great example of, that have impacted everybody, but it impacted the association and the industry as well. But when you look at the other issues like, the dot-com bust, the telecom bust in the early 2000s, that was a direct impact for UTC. I know you had to deal with that. And the real estate bust, I think you may have alluded to that earlier in the late 2000s. All of that impacts the association, and you've got to be able to kind of understand what's going on and be able to navigate those kind of waters when they get churned up.
Yep. I mean, we had when I came into UTC, UTC was had some financial issues. They didn't take too long to fix, and there were several times because of the economy or because of the industry retracting or whatever that we had to pull in our horns, and then we were able to invest going forward. But it's an example of whether it was internationally or with BPL or other things, we would find a way to invest with our stakeholders in trying new things, but we never bet the ranch. I mean, we would try and do things in a way that would perhaps involve UTC putting up some seed money to start some stuff, but never so much that we would harm our core business. And we were fortunate that we were able to do that. Sometimes it worked better than others, but it kept UTC going and kept us finding new ways to help our members.
Yeah, and when I think back, across your tenure, I think of two areas. We talked about strategic planning. That's one of the things I think of from the Bill Moroney years. The other is the whole idea of member engagement. That's still a big deal now. And, when we survey members about, why they are a part of this organization, that's always one of the top areas that they see value out of. But you did a lot in that area, right? You personally engaged with the members of the association and others around the industry, but you also allowed and created these platforms for the members to engage with each other. I mean, what did you see about that? Why was that important in your mind for not only the success of the association, but the success of the members and the industry?
Well, when I got started in this business, somebody once said to me, trade associations are a business that have members that pay you to sell stuff to them. So does
I like it.
So does Sam's Club, so does Costco, and they all are successful businesses. It is an organization, and I think UTC, unlike a lot of trade associations that don't rely too heavily on dues, UTC gives a lot of services for those dues. But it's a business, it's an organization that really relies on the core group of leaders in the organizations aggressively listening to their members, finding ways to sort of ask questions, to stimulate conversation, to have open-ended discussion items on agendas. It's kind of easy when you've got a dozen members in a room all saying the same thing. We got to do this. We got to do this. It's important. The challenge comes when that one guy who rarely speaks at the meeting summons up the courage, says something that strikes everybody as so off the wall that there's this painful silence in the room. That was important to me because I figured this guy came to a meeting, sat through the meeting, summoned up the courage to say something. And even if he sounded like a jerk, there was probably something in there worth exploring. More times than not, there was. There's something, even if the jerk was ineloquent, there was a kernel of an idea in there that was worth exploring. Because remember, as I said earlier, came to the meeting, spoke out loud. For every time somebody had a complaint or an off-the-wall idea, I figured there are probably a dozen more members out there that felt the same way. And I think that's the key to associations. And we had members on the board who recognized this. We had staff that recognized this. If you listen aggressively to what members are talking about, you learn a lot, and you are just so well served that you can do a great job in providing service to your members.
I love that phrase, aggressive listening. I talk a lot of times about, the difference in hearing and, listening and hearing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of in the same vein of, are we paying attention? And again, I've tried to adopt that motto myself, particularly in these early days of trying to listen to people and make myself available when we're out at a regional conference or other events, just to find out what's going on. And if you listen enough, you start hearing themes, and you hear the same thing 3 times over the course of 2 hours. You're going, oh crap, I better write that one down. That one's probably important. But that's a big challenge. And another theme that I give to the staff in particular is, hey, it's not about us. It's about the industry. It's not about, me personally, and it's not about the staff personally. It's about the organization and the industry. And we need to keep that in mind as we do what we do every day. All right, Bill. So if we start to wind down here toward the end of this time together, let me ask you one question. As you think back, and again, I'm a big, hey, let's learn from history guy. As you think back in your time at UTC or your time as in the career of all the trade association leadership roles you had, looking forward, sitting in the chair I'm sitting in now, what kind of advice do you have for me or for the association as we look forward into the future to help us be more successful?
Well, looking to the future, I'd start with the past. And, UTC has been around for over 75 years. There are very few trade associations that can say that. That is a big deal. And I think UTC has thrived and survived, or however you want to call it, because it's been driven by its members. It's harnessed that power. It's got a great legacy. It's got great committed members. And I think UTC's got a great shot at making it to 100 and beyond. If it just keeps on doing what it's doing. Listen to members, stay focused on what's core to the business. UTC will do great. There's no magic sauce. Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't screw with success.
Yeah, that's what I've told a couple of people is one of my biggest roles in this organization is to not get in the way and screw it up. Right. Mm-hmm. And let people do what they do. But you'll be happy to know in this year's strategic plan, the title and the mantra for the strategic plan is the March to 100. It's thinking that far ahead, and what have we got to do to get to that next 25 years, and then beyond that. Bill, it's been great. I enjoy talking with you, and you and I have spoken a few times since I've taken this role, and I appreciate what you do to help me. I've kind of adopted you as my mentor in this role, and helping me try to figure out just what I said, not to screw this thing up. But thank you for everything you did for the organization, and thank you for what you're doing today. I've kind of wandered off into this role that's new to me, but I appreciate you helping out and being with us today.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, and thank you very much for all you did as a member when I was there, and Thank you for taking on the challenge of leading UTC up to 100.
There we go. We look forward to doing just that. Well, that'll do it for this edition of the Intersection Podcast. I hope you'll subscribe, be looking for the next edition. And as we close out here today, let's remember the phrase that we've given 2 or 3 times over the past 30 minutes or so is let's remember and learn from the past, and that'll make the future brighter. Thank you for being here today, and we look forward to seeing you again in a future podcast.
Rusty, thanks very much.
Thank you for meeting us at the intersection. For more information about the Utilities Technology Council, visit utc.org.